Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. Manchester United remain unbeaten under Ole Gunnar Solkjaer, this time making easy work of Bournemouth. Where did Bournemouth go wrong? What did Manchester United do right? Don't worry, here at the interviews, we've got you covered. So on this edition of the interviews, we're going to briefly break down how United beat Bournemouth. So before we get into today's video, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/footy analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. In today's video, we're going to look at the first half, see how United were able to really kickstart the game and put themselves 3 goals ahead before Ake was able to get a late goal to make it 3-1. Then move to the second half and see what changes United made, how Pogba tried to influence the game, and how United were able to kill it off. But first, let's get to the starting lineups. We look at Bournemouth, more of a 3-5-2, Wilson and King up front, out in the wing-back areas, Ibe and Rico, and in midfield, Stanislas, Brooks, and Sermon. Then we move to Manchester United, more of a 4-3-3 with Pogba just a bit higher. They went with Rashford, Lingard, and Martial up front, Pogba just in behind them, and Herrera and Matic in midfield. So now let's look how both sides look to approach the game, what shapes they used, and how United was able to have the upper hand in the first half. So 4-3-3 against 3-5-2, when you look at it, it makes sense for Bournemouth to play this way. The United center backs this season haven't been the most reliable, so when you put them 1v1 against Wilson, against King, you like your chances. The way Bournemouth were looking to press was obviously from the front. You have the 2 players pressing out there. Then what you do is you require the wing backs to close a bit higher if you need them to be, if you're pressing from goal kicks or whatnot. You have them close out to Young, to Shaw, and then you still have 3v3 in midfield. That is what they were looking to do. That is how they try to press. And when they did press from the front, they didn't look too bad, but United were able to quickly get away from that based on the fact that in the earlier stages they had Herrera dropping off a bit deeper to make it 3v2, and they were able to play out the back from there because Bournemouth didn't want to pull any players out to him. We often saw Matic drop into that space as well throughout the game. There was one play in particular that we often saw, and it was Herrera. They'd push the fullbacks a bit higher, and Herrera would move more to the right-hand side to make it a 3, and that would really cause Bournemouth a few issues because, yes, they do have 3v2, and sometimes you think, okay, well, what's Herrera going to do from there? But sometimes it would pull Stanislas out of position. There's one play in particular that kind of really summed it up, was when Herrera moved out to the right position, Bailly had slid him the ball, and what happens there is that Stanislas pushes out to him, and what he ends up doing now is with Stanislas pushing out to him, he's able to play the ball back to Bailly, and Lingard from the right side is able to drop into that space to pick up the ball, making that triangle, creating a way for the wider players to get on the ball because the wider players weren't really necessarily sticking to those touch lines. Lingard was floating across, Rashford was looking to break into the channels, Martial was also looking to pick up the ball in narrow positions as well. So Pogba was trying to make forward runs and he was finding a lot of space between the lines, and that was because when you look at Bournemouth's midfield, they're not natural midfielders. Stanislas often plays in more attacking zone. Brooks often plays in a more attacking zone. So sometimes they were getting caught too high up, and it was Sermon who was left forced to deal with space, and that was the way that Lingard was able to pop in, Martial at times could pop in, Pogba was finding the ball between the lines, and that was one of the biggest issues they had because if they didn't press and they dropped off into more of a 5-3-2, they still have issues there because what happens now is that, like I said, Herrera is moving into that position. So Stanislas will push over into that area. It does make sense that now instead of holding on to the fullback, what happens there is that you have Rico push into that space there. But for the most part, they just weren't really combining in those areas. They weren't being able to close down. And in the 3-5-2, it does force a lot of work on the shuttlers in Brooks and in Stanislas. They need a bit more discipline because when, let's say Herrera stays in that position, when Young gets the ball, when you have Shaw getting the ball, you have to push the shuttlers out, and they weren't doing that consistently, and that was one of their biggest problems. Whereas for United, they were pressing from the front as well, which made sense. They had 3v3, they had Pogba stepping up to Sermon. Sermon did push forward to look and press the deepest midfielder as well, but his better position was to stay in ahead of the back 3 because there was so much space in midfield. But that's how United was going about it, pressing like that, then having the fullback step forward, and they were looking to close down in those areas as well. It was just a bit bit more work rate. You saw Pogba making late runs into the box. Bournemouth gave them time. And the one thing here is that when we get to the chances, we see that you could see that these aren't natural central midfielders because Bournemouth were switching off at every opportunity. Yes, they did create chances from more direct plays. You think about the long throw where King was able to easily turn his marker and fire a shot. De Gea, you look at the way that they scored the goal from a short corner, that's a deflected, and Brooks was able to get across Lingard and poke the ball to the near post for Ake. The time when United tried to press and they were able to break easily through the heart of United's midfield. So direct made sense for them. Direct play made sense for them. They could play balls into Wilson, who could lay it off. But besides that, from a defensive aspect, they just weren't compact. There was too much space in midfield. There was too much space between the midfield and the defensive bank. And Pogba found a lot of space in there. They didn't know how to pick up Matic or Herrera when they dropped off a bit deeper to get on the ball. So now let's look to United. Let's see their chances. Let's see how they were able to dissect this Bournemouth backline. And that will show us a lot about what Bournemouth did wrong and how easy it was for United to really pick them off. When we look to United's chances, we have to look to the fact, like we said, they had a lot of the ball. They were able to push it out into wider areas. Although the Bournemouth midfield three did match up well, they weren't very compact, and there was a lot of space in midfield for the United midfielders to operate and dictate play. The wider players were looking to come in, and that did allow the fullbacks to push forward in the wider areas. And sometimes we saw vice versa, where we'd see, let's say, Shaw move into that central area and Martial stick out into the wider area on the touchline or near the touchline. Here was more Lingard tucking in, and you had Young pushing forward from that right back position. But here on the other side, sometimes you'd have Shaw stay on the touchline and Martial move out. It was just about positional spacing, and they had that knocked down to a T. But when you look at their chances, it just goes to show how switched off Bournemouth were. And it's no surprise that a team coming into the game, winning just 2 of their last 10 games, doesn't really show any sign of confidence or the ability to snatch a point here. When we look to one of their first chances, or the build up to the goal, simple Young ball from deep, and it's clipped into that channel for Rashford making the run across, and you have Ake pushing out to him. Now what you see here is Rico recovering, but it's just too simple. Rashford able to use a bit of skill to skip past Rico, to skip past Ake, get past Rico, and then it's a simple cross into the 6-yard box. No one is able to attack it. Pogba was able to break free, and he taps it in to get United rolling earlier on, and that just kind of set an example or a precedence for how the game was going to go. Because when you look to another opportunity here, you see what United did very well. You have the center backs out. What happens here is that Herrera pushes into this position now. Stanislas thinks that he's going to step out to press him, but he doesn't end up doing it. Matic is able to pick up the ball and in that central zone, and he pushes forward. And now what you end up having here is with Matic pushing into that position, what we see is that we have Lingard dropping off in between Stanislas and Sermon. You have Pogba positioning himself in between Cook and in between Brooks. And what happens here is once Sermon makes that step, what happens here is that you see a pass in between Sermon and Brooks, and in between Ake, and in between Cook for Martial running off Jordan Ibe. As he runs off Jordan Ibe, Begovic notices it quickly, but he's able to push out and clear the lines. But when you see that, it's just simple. Sermon doesn't need to step there. He decides to step, and now look, everyone's out of position, so many gaps, no one closing them down, and a simple ball bypasses them, and they're taken out of the game. We look to one more opportunity. What happens here is Young is in a more central area. He drops it off to Herrera. With him dropping it off to Herrera now, what we end up seeing here is again, Herrera having the ball, Sermon stepping out to him. And with Sermon stepping out to him, that does leave a gap between Sermon and Brooks. And Herrera is able to pick out Pogba in that space, who is able to run at the back four and fire a low shot at the keeper. Again, just by Sermon not holding his position and being attracted to the marker, Brooks isn't too wide of a position, and there's a big gap in between for Pogba to sneak into, and he's able to get onto the ball and offer a goal-scoring threat. We look to build up to the goal. It's Matic sliding the ball to Herrera, and Herrera pushing it out wide. So Herrera slides the ball out wide, and then he ends up getting it back from Young. And what we see here is that Pogba is able to run off Brooks again, and he's able to slide in between the center backs in Ake and in Cook. Begovic comes out, and Pogba is able to to nod his effort past the keeper to make it 2-0. Yes, Pogba gets to break into the box. Stanislas should probably do a better job because at some point he has to pick up one of those markers. Young is his marker, but if Young is out there, Rico should be there, and you have Herrera there, so someone has to close down, make an effort to try and prevent the cross from going into the box. But Pogba's able to run off Brooks, who switched off, and make that and ensure that they double their lead. And then we get to the final goal of the half. It goes to really show, or the final United goal of the half, we finally get to see what they were trying to do. They were able to pick Bournemouth off the park so easily, and what it does stem with is, again, building out of the back. They have the center forwards there who were 1v1 with Lindelof and with Bailly, but now you have Herrera push out again into that right space. Stanislas steps to him. What happens again with Stanislas pushing off there? Lingard drops off. Lingard drops off into that space. Sermon follows him, but what you have now is Matic splitting the two center forwards to get onto the ball. So with Matic splitting the two center forwards and getting onto the ball, now he has ample space to really pick a pass. And what he ends up seeing is he sees Martial running off his marker in Ake, and he runs off Cook and then runs across Ake and in between Daniels to get onto the reverse long ball that's chipped into the right channel. He ends up taking off Rico. We see Pogba break into the box, and Pogba's role in this was very key because Pogba slides in between Ake and Cook to kind of take them out of the game. Again, Rashford from a deeper position is able to run off Brooks, who was bypassed on several occasions, and he's able to peel in behind Cook. You have Ibe there who could step, but he's worried about Shaw, so he's caught in no man's land. The cross isn't protected, delivered into the box. Pogba takes the two center backs out of position. Ibe is caught out, and you have Rashford who's able to guide his effort into the net. You break down the game in the first half. It's just simple, moving their central midfielders out of position. Bournemouth's midfield not being disciplined, not closing down markers out in wider areas, switching off, and United were able to take advantage of that by obviously at some points overloading the midfield, but just making simple runs, and Bournemouth weren't picking them up. They weren't doing a really good job on the defensive end, and United were fully deserving of their lead going into the first half. So now let's briefly look at the second half. Not too many storylines there, but we'll look to see what United did and how Pogba changed his role slightly to affect the game. There wasn't much of a significant tactical change in the second half. What we did see was Paul Pogba dropping off a bit deeper, getting on the ball, trying to find that long diagonal on several occasions because he wasn't being closed down in these areas, trying to get Young in behind, trying to play Rashford in behind as well, and Lingard breaking free. It wasn't really working for them, but he still played a key role in some of their better chances. And when we look at it, it stems from the same kind of issues that Bournemouth had. Just like I said, not really compact in midfield, easily taken out of the game by simple passes. The midfield line and the defensive line just not compact enough. But we saw that in one of their key chances in the second half, where the ball is switched out by Lindelof to Shaw. Ibe quickly steps to him. Shaw plays the ball to Martial, who's tracked by Cook. Cook tracks him all the way to half, and he's able to play the ball into Matic, and what happens now is Matic is able to play the pass in between Stanislas and in between Sermon for Pogba. Pogba now is able to get onto the ball, but look at the gap in between. No one closing down Matic. The gap is so wide. All he needs to do is take that one pass and split the defense. Matic is underrated in the fact that he's a deep line creator, often mistaken for solely a holding midfielder. He can play that role, but he's a great passer of the ball, and as you can see right there, easily take them out of the game with no pressure on him. Able to run at goal. What makes it simple now is that Pogba now runs. Rashford's able to run in behind Ake with the ball played across him. Begovic comes out, makes a great save from the dink to ensure that United don't build their lead. We saw some changes. We saw Fraser and we saw Mousse come on. They moved to more of a 3-4-3, which technically doesn't really help their case, but they're chasing the game, they're trying to win it, and they're trying to get back into it. So it leaves more space in midfield. They had the wider players, King move out to the left, but again, no real change in that system. Bournemouth didn't really threaten United that much in that sense. And then we have Lukaku come on for Rashford. And when we see the fourth goal again, it just shows the issues that Bournemouth had. By clearing the ball from his own half, Lukaku able to knot it down into the path of Martial, who nodded into the path of Pogba. Sermon half-heartedly steps to him, and Pogba just able to simply dink the ball over Ake for Lukaku spinning off him, who lets the ball roll across his body, and he fires his shot past the keeper. That was the second half in a nutshell. United in full control, looking great under Solskjaer. Despite playing weaker opposition, they're getting the job done, and that's the most important thing at this time of the season as they're looking to get back into the top 4 race. But let me know what you guys think. Is this just a new manager bounce? Is it because of the easy schedule, or is United really changing their tide under Solskjaer? And what about Bournemouth? Not really good over the last 10 games. Started the season well. Will they finish in the top half of the table? Will they face a relegation battle as well? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.